Your life is filled with the word later. And the sad thing is that later just becomes another word for never. Every single thing that you want is on the other side of something you don't want to do. There's a price that you have to pay to achieve the things that you want in life. Build your life around the things that you truly care about rather than the things that society tells you should care about, which is basically just money. Money is going to be a tool, but not a goal in and of itself. Never let the quest for more distract you from the beauty of enough.
What does it mean to actually be wealthy in 2025? How do you define wealth? Today, you're going to meet somebody who actually has a new, refined, and new age definition of what it means to be wealthy. Not just in one dimension of your life, but across all dimensions of your life. Today, I'm excited and humbled to introduce to you an individual that I followed his content and his journey for quite a while, but the opportunity to meet him in person, sit down, pick his brain, and share this insight with you is truly a treat for all of the Inside the Inspired community. Today, you're going to meet Sahil Bloom, an entrepreneur, an author, a father, husband, athlete, and so much more. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Sahil Bloom. How are you today, sir?
Thank you. That was a great introduction. I appreciate it.
I left out creator with millions of followers also, among the many other things when it comes to that. How's your new year going so far?
Well, we're so fresh into it. I've never been big on New Year's resolutions. I feel like everyone at the start of every new year, I'll get all these texts being like, what are your New Year's resolutions? Or someone will ask me that. And I've always thought it was a little funny that you try to pick a resolution on January 1st that's just going to be relevant throughout the entire year for your life. Just knowing how life works and knowing the natural chaos that ensues and the changes that happen during the course of the year, it's so hard to imagine picking something on January 1st that's still going to be relevant midway through the year at the end of the year. And so I've been big over the last few years on setting New Year's intentions, like a much bigger picture mindset or value that I'm really going to try to embrace and kind of hold close to my heart in the year ahead. So the last couple of days have really been trying to establish what those intentions are going to be for the year ahead and trying to get started on the right foot with moving forward with those.
So when it comes to setting intention, well, I'll just give a quick background. I have a background as an attorney, and intent as it's defined in the law, is about a conscious objective. And so I'm curious, what are your intentions as you've kind of outlined some of how you look at, going into a new year? What are some of the intentions that you're setting?
I think the first one is probably the most important, which is recognize time as the most valuable asset. And it obviously applies directly to the book and what we're going to talk about during this conversation. But when you are young, you are extraordinarily rich in one particular thing, which is time. It's really the only thing that you're rich in when you're young. It's the only thing you have. When you're starting your career, when you're early on in your life, time is the only thing that you have. You don't have money, you don't have networks, you don't have knowledge, you don't have experience, you don't have wisdom, you don't have any of those things. You have time. And so being very deliberate about how you invest that time to gain those other things that you want is so important. Because every single day, if you go back and look at your prior year, you take actions that are disregarding the value of that asset, disregarding the value of that time. You're doing dumb things. You're scrolling on your phone. You're losing all of this time that is so precious and so valuable. And it's a question that I pose in the book. I ask people, would you trade lives with Warren Buffett? He's worth $130 billion the last time I checked. He has access to anyone in the world. He spends his time flying around on private jets, mansions, reads and learns for a living every single day. But you wouldn't trade lives with him simply because he is 95 years old. There's no way you would trade $130 billion that you might get for the amount of time that he has left. So you simultaneously understand that your time has incalculable value. And yet you take actions on a daily basis that disregard that. And we all do. It's not like I'm saying you. I'm using you as kind of the proverbial you. And so that's my first intention, is just to, on a daily basis, remind myself to recognize time as my most valuable asset. Because once you do that, you start operating differently.
The thing about you, though, and that particular sentiment when it comes to time is, I feel like, and I'm sure you're very hard on yourself about it, is that it doesn't really seem like you took time for granted. It seems like, just based on someone who spent the first 6 years of their career waking up at 3:45 in the morning, get to the gym and to the office by 6:30 a.m., having a full 12, 14-hour day, I'm sure more hours, you could put that in perspective, doesn't seem like you ever took time for granted. So when it comes to that type of approach, that type of discipline, that type of perspective so early in your career, what made you want to take that kind of radical, disciplined, deliberate, intentional action?
I mean, you have to separate a couple things here. So first off, I agree that there were certain aspects of my life where I did not take time for granted, where I was very structured, where I really was disciplined and pushed myself. But there were others where I very much did. And that was in the case of much bigger picture, more important things in life, like the amount of time you have left with the people that you love most. I very much took for granted the amount of time that I had left with my parents, as an example. I stopped visiting often as I prioritized making money. I stopped calling. I stopped spending as much time with them. These are the people that I was closest to in the entire world for my entire life. That, to me, is one of the worst time decisions you can make, because what you realize as your parents get older is that the amount of times you're actually going to see them is extraordinarily limited. And it was that realization that actually led to this massive change in my life that has sparked being here today and having this conversation, writing this book in the first place, which you'll read in the prologue of the book. The whole book opens with that realization. But I would say there's just differences in the spheres in which you are either appreciating or disregarding time. So I was very much appreciating and valuing it and understanding how important it was in the sense of my financial pursuits, but very much disregarding it in the sense of all of these other areas. And the reason that's important, and the reason that I harp on it, is because your life is filled with the word later. Most people will use the word later over and over again. You say, I'll spend more time with my kids later. I'll see my parents more later. I'll focus on my health later. I'll work on my purpose later. And the sad thing is that later just becomes another word for never, because those things are not going to exist in the same context later. Your kids are not going to be 5 years old later. Your parents are not going to be alive later. Your health is not going to be in the same place later. So either you build these things into your life now, or you're just going to regret it later.
Something like that perspective of, there's the converse of that, where every delay is for the best. Sometimes, it's not the right time to take action. Sometimes you have to put things off before you're actually ready. But when it comes to family, I mean, I know you hold your family in a very high regard, obviously. I do as well. It's how I build the rest of my life around. It's like family first and everything kind of fits in after that. But getting back to the discipline and the focus that comes along with someone who wakes up at that hour. I was talking to someone yesterday. Someone reached out to me. I'm a 5:30 a.m. guy, depending on the day and what time my daughter wakes up. But how did you cultivate that discipline to wake up early? Someone asked me, how can I wake up earlier? And I gave them my feedback on what I thought was the right answer. But I'm curious, from your perspective, as someone who's up before 4 a.m. or around 4 a.m. every day, how do you cultivate that discipline?
Yeah. I mean, when I started my career, I took a job at an investment firm, and I knew what that entailed. I basically knew, I'm going to be an analyst in the world of private equity, in the world of investing. And that means certain things about how hard you're going to work. And you're going to learn a ton. The learning curve is incredible. The opportunity set is incredible. You're going to get paid quite well. But it also means you're going to be working a lot. And I basically knew that evenings were out for the foreseeable future. I was going to be working. I was going to be at the office. And so if I wanted to continue any level of my workout habit, which I'd had from my days, I played Division I baseball, I was going to go early in the morning and go get that done before I got to the office. And so I basically looked at my day. I sat down with a calendar, and I've always been big on like the whole idea of don't tell me your priorities, show me your calendar. And so I looked at my calendar and I said, okay, let's take a normal weekday. I'm going to be at the office. If the normal person is showing up to the office at 8:30 and they're going to be there until, 10 p.m. or 8 p.m., I'm going to show up at the office at 6:30 because I want to make sure that I'm doing more. That was just like what I understood. And I understood that from my baseball days. I was like, if I do more, then I'm going to get more out of it. So let me just do a little bit more than what's standard. And what that meant was that if I was going to get a workout in before being in the office at 6:30, I had to get to the gym by 4:45. To be at the gym by 4:45 and be awake enough to work out, I got to wake up at 3:45. So I worked backwards. I was like, okay, I got to wake up at 3:45. That's pretty damn early. All right, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And for 6 years, I woke up at 3:45 every single day. I mean, yeah, there were days when I didn't because I was traveling or doing whatever it was. But one thing that I learned from that is it is very rarely your time or energy that is to blame. It's your desire. And you make time, you create energy for the things that you really want. I mean, if you have a 6 a.m. flight to go catch for a vacation, you will wake your ass up at 3 a.m. to go and catch that flight, and you'll make it. But then when it comes to waking up early to go and build the life that you want, people won't do it. They'll say, oh, I don't have time. I don't have the energy to wake up that early. It's like, that's not a time or an energy problem. That's a desire problem. And if you don't have the desire, that's fine. You don't need to change your life. You don't need to create these transformations. You don't need to do these things. But extraordinary results are just the result of extraordinary inputs. You have to be willing to make those sacrifices. And I would say I always knew that. And I knew that from my dad, like just watching my dad and the way that he operated, how he worked hard on things that he really cared about. I remember one particular trip that I got to go on with him. He's a professor, and he was speaking at this conference. And we had like a 12-hour flight. It was in Asia, and he was going to be speaking there. I think he was the keynote speaker. And I was like his +1 for this event because my mom and sister had to stay home. And the whole flight, like 12-hour flight, I'm like this little kid on a plane. I'm like watching movies. I'm eating all the meals. It was so fun. And my dad worked. It was an overnight flight. Like the whole 12-hour flight, he just worked. Didn't watch a movie, didn't eat, whatever. He was just working on his presentation, on his talk. And I asked him when we landed, I was like, Dad, you didn't watch a single movie on that flight. And he said, this is what's required for me to perform at the level that I expect of myself. This is what's required for me to bring you on a trip like this, is that I have to go out and perform. And I remember that lesson really sticking with me, that when you want something, you are capable of achieving it, but you have to be willing to actually put in the work. You have to be willing to make whatever sacrifices are required, whether it's silly movies on a plane or whether it's a little bit of sleep here and there, to go and achieve the things that you want. Look, the last thing I'll say on this is there's this whole narrative now, especially like in the Twitterverse or social media, of like, oh, you have to sleep, you need a deep work ritual, you need a morning routine, you need all of this. Here's the harsh truth. No one cares about your deep work routine or your morning routine if your output is shit. No one cares. The reality is that deep work routines and morning routines might get you social media likes, but output is what gets you paid. Output quality and quantity is what gets you paid. So when someone asks like, well, what was your deep work routine when you were working all those hours at your first job? I didn't have a deep work routine. I just had to get a lot of stuff done. And like, there was no deep work. I wasn't like locked in doing a million things to like get really focused. I just had to get a lot done. And so I had to be there a certain number of hours to do that. And I think you miss the forest for the trees when you're focusing so much on the inputs. I think it's great to establish a level of clarity about what your inputs are going to be and really like pride yourself on the inputs. But at the end of the day, the world is judging you for your outputs. And unless the outputs are where you want them to be, you probably need to adjust the inputs. And so that's an important thing for a lot of people to internalize, is like, you can't look for pats on the back for your inputs when the outputs aren't there yet. Once the outputs are there, everyone's going to care about your deep work routine. If you have crazy output, everyone's going to want to know what your deep work routine is, what your morning routine is. But until that, you should really make sure that you're adjusting your inputs in order to get the outputs you want.
After I finished 2 years in the military, I was 2 years infantry combat in the IDF, and I came back and I worked for the New Jersey Nets as an intern. They were now the Brooklyn Nets, but at the time they were looking to move to Brooklyn. And so family friends with the CEO at the time, Brett Yarmark, and he took me to China with him to pitch the idea of Brooklyn to Chinese company sponsors, because the Nets had a Chinese player at the time, Yi Jianlian. And I remember waking up saying, I'm going to get to the gym like 6 a.m. But at the time I wasn't weightlifting, just running. And I remember walking into the gym at 6 a.m. and the CEO is now the commissioner of the Big 12 and his right-hand guy were finishing a set and walking out, and they said, I'll see you at breakfast. I had a clear vision for what it meant to be quote unquote successful and to maintain a fit, healthy body while providing immense value, holding immense responsibility. My dad obviously always woke up early and found ways to get things done, and that was an immense influence for me. But having that clear vision for what it looked like to achieve incredible disproportionate outcomes and a fit, healthy mind body was so like, oh, this is what it takes. Like, I have to be out by 6 a.m. in order to go do my job. I can't do it after because I'll just be too tired. So that was a big influence for me and clarity for me, and why I now do the things that I do, because it helps me maintain focus.
Yeah. I had a similar experience to that with Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, who was one of maybe 5 or 6 other people who would work out at the gym at 4:45 in the morning when I first started my first job. And for the first 6 months, I didn't know who he was. Like, he was just one of the 5 or 6 people that was there every morning. And I wasn't in tech, so I just didn't recognize him. He was the new CEO at the time, not nearly as famous as he is now. And reflecting on that now, and knowing also, by the way, that he still does that. Now he has to go to, private space because he's much bigger, more prominent figure. But reflecting on that idea that, like, the CEO of the largest company in the world, effectively like a head of state, waking up at 3:45 every single morning, showing up at the gym and working out every single day, and getting into the office before any of his employees have probably woken up or checked their email, like firing emails back to people at 4 in the morning on the way to the gym in the car. Completely insane to think about that. But again, that is what is required to perform at that top 0.001% level. You need to decide if you want to do that. That's a completely separate thing, but you need to understand if you do, there's a price tag to achieving those things. And you need to decide if you're willing to pay that price. That is one of the most probably important principles, I would say, in life, is every single thing that you want is on the other side of something you don't want to do. There's a price that you have to pay to achieve the things that you want in life, whether it's an incredible career, whether it's an incredible relationship, an incredible body, and clear, calm mind. All of those things have a price tag. And you have to be clear-eyed about what that price tag is and decide if you want to pay it or not. And I've been so inspired by him as an individual because he is so resolute and resilient in his focus on the things that he wants to achieve and the things that he wants to do. And he knows what he's willing to do and the inputs that he's willing to put forward over, now it's been 10 plus years. I know he's still doing that. Incredible to see people like that and see the inspiration that you can glean from it.
I also want to note that Tim Cook is one of the testimonials of your new book, The 5 Types of Wealth. Congratulations on the release. It's an incredible achievement, accomplishment, and it's going to do a lot of good in this world.
Yeah, he became a mentor along the way after we got to know each other a lot more, and has been an incredible supporter, and was a big driving force in me deciding to go down this different path. I remember asking him several years ago when I was thinking about leaving my other job. I was really scared. I was telling him, like, I was thinking about going and doing these other things and trying something different and seeing what happens. And he was just like, yeah, I think you should do it. And it's one of those weird things where, like, sometimes you look for permission from someone to go and do the thing that, like, is right, but you just need someone out there to be like, yeah, you can definitely do that, or you should go do that, because you aren't willing to, like, take the leap by yourself. You need someone to tap you in, and he was very much that for me. So I'm very grateful for that.
Arguably the greatest entrepreneur of all time.
Yeah, certainly. He's certainly up there. He's created trillions of dollars of value at this point, which is an insane number to even say, but unbelievable. Yeah.
You brought up resilience. How have you cultivated resilience in your life?
I think doing hard things is trendy to say, but extraordinarily impactful in your life when you really embrace it. The narrative around hard things is interesting because a lot of people will say do hard things, but very few people are willing to tell you why it's so important. And the reason I think it is so important to do hard things is because life is hard. And when you take on voluntary struggle, you prepare yourself, you build the muscle to deal with the involuntary struggle that inevitably comes into your life and into your world. That is why you should do hard things. That is why you should self-incur struggle so that you are more well prepared, so that you build that resilience muscle. And you can do that in a number of different ways. I think the easiest ways to do it would be to put yourself through physical challenges. And for me, that's getting cold on a regular basis, my morning cold plunges. That's the workouts I do. That's the runs I do. That's the saunas in the evening that get really hot and really miserable at the end of it. It's going through these physical struggles on a daily basis that build your mind in a certain way and build that resilience muscle so that you can handle those stressful situations that enter whenever they do, because we're all going to face those. And so being prepared for them along the way through the actions you're taking on a daily basis is the best advice that I can give.
In particular, for you, running has been a medium to channel those hard things. Likewise with myself, as you know, I finished this 58-mile ultra marathon back in September. And on the back of the shirt that I created with my wife for the event, I said, the best sides of who we are exist on the other side of the hardest things we've ever done. Very similar sentiment to how you articulate doing hard things. When it comes to the hardest things that you've ever done, how have those experiences shaped your character?
I also think there's a difference between like acute hard things and macro hard things. Like macro hard thing is making a giant change and leap in your life when it makes no sense. It was a very hard thing for me to go tell my wife that I thought we needed to make a change, leave a great job and a great set of colleagues in California to pursue this new path that didn't really have a clear end, didn't really have a clear strategy, leave the thing that had a lot of prestige, a lot of status attached to it, a lot of money. That was a very hard thing in a macro sense. And I learned a lot from doing that. You know, I learned that the muscle of figuring it out can be built, and there's a lot to be said for that. But acute hard things, I'm trying to think what the most like painful thing is that I've endured. I have to imagine my marathons are up there just because of the intensity at which I ran them. Like, I'm not a particularly gifted runner.
The guy running sub-3 marathons.
Yeah, but that's what I mean is like, it was, I just started, and I'm not like a skinny, runner body type. And so it was hard. I mean, like this most recent one that I ran, my average heart rate was 187 for 2 hours and 53 minutes. Like that's a near red line for a really long time. Very, very painful. So those were really hard experiences. I would say more mentally than physically, frankly. Physically, it just hurts. And like you learn to just kind of, it hurts and I'm just going to keep running. But that's more mental than anything else. There are very few, like if your leg broke, you cannot keep running. Or if there's like an injury, you cannot keep running. But at some point, it's just a mental thing of like, I'm not injured. It just hurts a lot. Yeah. Can I just convince myself to go a little bit longer? Can I just convince myself to go for another 5 minutes or another mile or whatever it is? And that mental struggle is an acute one. And I think, look, I hearken back a lot to this one winter in Boston. I think it was 2013 winter. One of my best friends, I was still playing college baseball at the time. It was kind of my last hurrah. And one of my best friends in the world is this guy, Chad Rogers, who was a professional baseball player for 10 years. And he used to come and live with my family during the off season, and we'd train together. And that last year, it was like both of our sort of like it was like our last ditch attempts at sort of making it in the sport at that point. And what we realized was that it wasn't going to be a physical thing. Like it wasn't going to be that we were better. It was that we were going to try to harden our minds so that we were like really resilient when we were out there. And so we started just doing every night some stupid physical challenge. And it was freezing that winter in Boston. It was like 0 out every night. So we'd go out and do crazy stuff. Like we, shirtless bear crawled up this mountain near my house one night in the snow. We like got into this frozen river and went like a half a mile upstream and then ran home. Like we were doing just crazy, dumb physical challenges with it like wasn't trendy at the time. We weren't posting this on social media. Like we were literally just doing this stuff. And I think so much about that now. The one learning I had, and we talk about this still, and we're still dear friends, was like, we realized that we had become hard to kill, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like, we knew when we were doing it that it was miserable and awful, but we weren't going to quit because we were in it together. And when you recognize yourself as hard to kill, your whole brain sort of rewires. And you just realize that like, it's going to really hurt. You're going to go through a lot of struggle. You're going to suffer a whole lot, but I'm really hard to knock out of the fight.
Oh yeah.
And that is the most empowering mentality and mindset you can have in life, because it allows you to get through anything. If like whatever struggle comes your way, and it could be the worst things, right? Like you just think about these things that are knockout blows. can I just take it and just be hard to kill, just bounce back on the other side of it and, pick the pieces up for my family, for my friends, for whoever it is that are around me. And I hope that I'm able to maintain that whenever true chaos enters my life. I've been very blessed, knock on wood, and that's not always going to be the case. We all face horrific things. And, my family has faced things in the last 6 months that I wouldn't have wished on anybody. But we face them together. And the resilience that comes from that, from knowing that you're going to be there for those people, from knowing that you are hard to kill in that way mentally, there's so much power in it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. I was going to ask you, how do you maintain your unique competitive edge? And I think you did a very good job of articulating voluntarily taking on hard things and putting yourself in a position to just on a whim do an extremely difficult challenge for the sake of doing the challenge. No filming, no content, not telling anyone until a decade plus later where it's relevant in the conversation, and owning those tiny wins for yourself that, like you said, empower you to believe in yourself, take risks, and bet on yourself, right? To build your own kind of wealth. So let's talk about the book a bit. The 5 types of wealth: social, financial, physical, mental,
Time.
What was the idea for the book? When did you start thinking about the problem of wealth in this way?
It was a manifestation of my own journey. I spent the first 7 years of my professional life narrowly focused on our cultural definition of wealth and our cultural definition of success, which is money. We measure ourselves and we establish our own worth in life entirely based on the amount of money that we make. It's a single number that we use to determine our entire worth as a human being. And unfortunately, it is a singular definition that is not particularly well aligned with the things that we know create a meaningful, happy, fulfilling life. You go and ask people what their ideal day looks like at age 80 or age 90. You go ask, I did, thousands of people. Basically, everyone says the same things. And it has very little to do with money. It has a lot to do with time, people, purpose, and health. Those are really the 4 things that people align around. They say they want to be free, have a level of freedom. They say they want to have the people around them that they really love. They say they want to feel like they have meaning and purpose in the things that they're doing, and they say they want to be healthy. Money is an enabler to some of those things, but it's not an end in and of itself. And yet, you go ask the people what they're doing on a daily basis to get to that end, and basically they're all chasing money. And the reason is because money is so easily measured. Peter Drucker is this management theorist, very famous. He says, what gets measured gets managed. And it's the idea that the thing that you can measure ends up being the thing that you optimize around. It's the thing that you narrowly focus on. And so there are a lot of people out there that are just like me, who have convinced themselves that if they just make a little bit more money, or if they just make 3x as much or 5x as much, that they'll suddenly wake up and feel fulfilled and happy and free, and they'll have time, and the people, and they'll be able to focus on their health and do all these things. And the reality is that all that happens is you get to that number and you just reset to the next one and you continue chasing it. And for me, I had the reckoning moment where I was chasing that. I had all those things. I had made a bunch of money. I was making more. I had a clear pathway to making a whole lot of money. But as I was on that journey, I was seeing everything else in my life slowly deteriorate. My relationships with my parents, I wasn't seeing them. My sister had effectively ground to a halt. My relationship with my wife was strained. We were struggling to conceive at the time, which was a real burden that we were carrying. My health, I was drinking 7 nights a week. All of these things in my life were suffering. While on the outside looking in, you would have said I was winning the game because I was making more and more money. I was getting promoted. All these things are good. And what I realized in that moment, at that time in my life, which was really just 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, was if that was what winning the game looked like, I had to be playing the wrong game. And that was when I made the decision to change the path. We sold our house in California. I left my job and we moved across the country to be closer to our parents. to create time with the people that we really wanted to be around, to be present in those moments. And I went on a journey to redefine what success, what wealth looked like to us, and to go build a life around those things that we truly cared about. And so that's what this book is about. It's not about telling you the way to live your life. It's about helping you ask the right questions so that you can come to the answer for yourself. Build your life around the things that you truly care about rather than the things that society tells you should care about, which is basically just money. Money is going to be a tool, but not a goal in and of itself.
We were talking a bit before about the Elon Musk, Walter Isaacson book. And in the beginning of the book, he talks about Elon growing up, and he mentions Elon's interest in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And what fascinated him about it was the particular question of asking a supercomputer, what's the meaning of life? And the answer was 42. I'd never read the book. I've read hundreds of books, but I haven't read that particular
It's a great
one.
book.
And it was kind of this existential moment for Elon where he's like, I don't really understand this whole meaning of life. And he was like around 10, 15 years old, whatever it was. And he starts to deliberate around what the meaning of life is. And so eventually he comes to the conclusion based on the book that it's about the quality of the questions that we ask in order to come to more effective answers. Better the question, better the answer. So it sounds like there's a ton of reflection questions in this book. And I'm curious, when it comes to figuring out how to systematize and create frameworks around certain principles that you've identified that make for a wealthy life, where does all of that come from?
You're absolutely right on the questions piece, by the way. But the whole book is built around questions, really around the premise that you already have the answers within you. You just haven't asked the right questions yet to reveal them. And I felt that in my own life. I already knew the answers for what I really wanted in life, for the life that I wanted to build, for what a wealthy life looked like to me. I just hadn't sat with the questions long enough to uncover those answers. And so the journey to ask those questions can be accelerated because someone can help you ask them. You can go and sit with them. And if you read the book, you will. You'll sit with them and you'll start to be able to take actions to go build your life around those answers that fit for you. I really tend to think that the frameworks, the systems, the ideas, there's sort of a combination of ancient wisdom that is Lindy effect approved, if you will, in that the reason it has persisted, the reason it still exists is because it works. The simple, boring basics that have been passed down since the days of, the ancient Greek philosophers on through today, Stoic wisdom, the reason that still gets talked about is because it really works and it's effective. So the things that I write about, the things I share in the book are all proven through either history and sort of ancient practices and wisdom, science today, the latest research on things that we know are effective based on the latest scientific research, or my own personal anecdotal experience with using these specific frameworks and strategies. Some combination of those three is how I kind of put together the ideas that are going to be framed in the book. And the way that it's structured is that each type of wealth has its own section. And at the end of each of those sections, there's a guide for actually building that type of wealth in your life. That guide is filled with those exact practices. The things that I have proven through either science, through history, or through my own experience really work for building that type of wealth in your life.
What I appreciate about you, and I met you now is the second time I got the chance to hang out with you, you really do practice everything that you preach. And when it comes to being proven, like, you walk the walk, man. And those kind of people are very few and far between. When it comes to building that self-belief in yourself, I imagine that a few years ago, when things were kind of going haywire to the point where you reached this inflection point where you knew something needed to change, you kind of outlined the catalyst for what that change was. But when did you get to the other side where you realized this is who I am now and this is the path forward? What was that moment like? Is it one singular moment? Is it compounding moments?
I share this in the book, in the prologue. For me, it was really one moment. So I shared a few minutes ago that we had been struggling to conceive in California for about 2 years. which I don't know if there's anyone out there that's listening that has had that or is going through that currently, but it's something that you tend to suffer with in silence. And for women in particular, it's something that they carry on their backs when scientifically it's actually often the man's fault, as it were. I actually think that with my stress and where I was mentally in life, it probably was me. Because within 2 weeks of making all the changes, we moved back to the East Coast to live back closer to family. We were in a better place. My wife got pregnant naturally. In May of 2022, my son was born. We got home from the hospital and we pulled onto our street. We pulled into our driveway, and both our sets of parents were in the driveway, like cheering. And I just remember in that moment having that sensation of like, we're home. We're in the right place. And home in the sense of where you're meant to be, where you're supposed to be. And that was so affirming of these decisions that we made, of this idea of like, this is life, right? And about 2 weeks later, I was taking my son out for a walk early one morning. My wife was still asleep, and I took him out for a walk. And we were on the sidewalk, and this old man came up to me. And he said, I remember standing here with my newborn daughter. She's 45 years old now. It goes by fast. Cherish it. And I took my son home and brought him into bed with us. My wife was still asleep, and the sun was kind of coming through the windows. It was like this perfect, idyllic moment. My son had this little smile on his face. And I just remember having this sensation that for the first time in my life, I had arrived, but there was nothing more that I wanted. It wasn't like that disappearing vision of the future where all of a sudden it resets on some further goal or target. I had arrived, but it was perfect. And there was no more that I wanted. And so the line that I write in the book and that I share is, never let the quest for more distract you from the beauty of enough. And in that moment, I had enough. That was all I want. If I had nothing else the rest of my life, if that was all that I had, it was enough. And that to me was like the real turning point in this whole journey, was just this realization that like, this was right. This was the path. And I just had to walk it. And I didn't need anything more. And if I did achieve anything more, it was going to be a byproduct of standing in my purpose. It was going to be working on things that I cared about. It wasn't going to be because I was chasing some mirage off in the distance.
I think that kind of perspective helps shape others' perspective, where they can understand for themselves what it means to be enough, right? To kind of reach that threshold of, I don't want anything else. But at the same time, you're an extremely ambitious person, an extremely accomplished person who has all of these incredible achievements under his belt. But you kind of tap that threshold where you're like, hey, I've arrived. They say humility turns into invisibility unless you talk about it, unless you promote yourself. We've been hyping you up a lot, rightfully so. When it comes to that kind of humility that you've embraced and that you clearly embody despite everything that you've done, what is it that keeps you humble? What is it that, even though you've acquired an audience of an audience of millions of people, built your wealth, become an authority on the 5 types of wealth, what is it that keeps you humble?
I genuinely don't think there is anything particularly special about me. I think that I have a unique ability to live out and share things that I am learning on my own journey. And I think that the fact that I am willing and able to do that consistently and authentically has attracted people to that journey, because those people can see themselves in it in some way, shape, or form, and I can hopefully add some amount of value to their lives. But I am never going to be the richest person. I'm never going to be the most fit person. I'm never going to be the biggest creator in the world. I'm never going to be the most successful author in the world, simply because I'm doing all of this. Like I'm trying to find a balance point of all of these things. I'm not willing to trade time with my son during these early years of his life to pursue building a bigger audience. I'm not going to go challenge people to boxing matches and, tweet out tons of political hot takes just to build an audience. It's not what I want to do. I want to build a balanced wealthy life across all of these areas, which means that you have to find the balance point. You can't perfectly optimize every single area at all points in your life. And that just means certain things about how I'm going to live and the things that I'm going to embrace. It means I'm going to have seasons when I am unbalanced. Like right now, I'm really pushing because I want to get this book out in the hands of as many people as possible because I believe so strongly in the impact that it can have once it's out in the world. But that's going to be followed by a season of balance and resetting and making sure that I am with my son more often and really embracing those moments with my wife and him. And so I don't know. I mean, humility is kind of a funny thing. It's funny to me that the standard that we expect from people is that they're going to be like chest pounding about their success. And I think a part of that is because a lot of social media is dominated by people who state their credibility as like the hook to getting people to see the content. So you're filled with video, like money gurus, right? Like every video or everything is like, I sold my company for $100 million. Here's what I learned, basically, over and over again. Because it gets clicks and it gets views and it doesn't appear humble. I actually don't know that it's a reflection on the humility of the person as much as like they're a byproduct of the algorithm. They have to do certain things to do it. I have no interest in that. I'm like more than happy getting less views on things to just not have to do things like that. Even like, you know, my team will sometimes be like, oh, this YouTube video, you should say what you've achieved with business or with your investment fund or all these things. I'm like, guys, I don't, if that's what it takes for it to get more views, I don't know. Because my mental model for all of this is like, if Tim Cook, as like a mentor, sees this video, is he going to roll his eyes at me? Is he going to be like, oh, come on, why are you doing that? And I don't want, like, I'm genuinely not willing to trade that, like from people I respect and admire, to roll their eyes at me. I'm not willing to do that if that's what's required. I think that that's a really important, actually, just framework in general that I'm accidentally running into here, which is your goal should be to achieve respect and admiration from the people you respect and admire, not from random people that don't matter to you, right? Like, I don't flash around fancy watch. I'm wearing a running watch, right? Like, I don't flash around fancy cars or fly on private jets or do these things that, like, maybe I do have the money to do certain things like that. I don't do it because the people that I really want to respect and admire me aren't going to care. Like, it's going to be embarrassing to them that I'm acting that way, right? Like, no money guru that like takes a picture in front of a private jet and is like, yo, get like this, buy my Discord community or whatever, get in my thing. They're not respected by real business people, right? Like, that's just not how you gain the respect of those people. You gain it by building something of value. You gain it by helping people, by acting in the service of others, by creating things that create value for people. And so one thing that you have to learn is like, who are you trying to impress? And what does it take to impress those people? And first off, the first person that you need to impress is yourself. So take actions that make you impressive to yourself. But beyond that, what are the actual status things that you have to earn? The things that you cannot buy. You can't buy status that is meaningful. You have to earn it. You have to build something. You have to build a deep relationship. You have to build a healthy body. Those are status points that you cannot go out and buy. No one can get those faster than you because they have money. They require effort. They require inputs over long periods of time. And so those are the things that I'm really chasing, the things that I'm really after.
Two things you covered that I'm glad you brought up. I said I haven't wanted to look at my laptop, and I just want the conversation to flow. And it's important because these two particular topics are something that I love to hone in on. One is balance, one is value. And you posted an incredible thread recently about value that I don't want to forget to come back to, and creating wealth, but balance. When I deliver seminars on resilience, one of the harsh truths that I deliver, and I'm curious your feedback on, is that balance is a lie. You talked about seasons, and that's partly why I believe balance is a lie. There's seasons where you sprint. There's seasons where you take a step back to reset, like you outlined. I think that the word balance in today's day and age is overused, negatively stigmatized, and it prevents people from actually taking a singular focus for a period of time to do the thing, or kind of set any focus. They're trying to do too many different things, right? Like, they try to diversify before they've focused on the single thing. What's your perspective on the sentiment that balance is a lie?
I think that the mistake is that we think of balance as necessary in the micro, meaning when you think about balance in your life, and this is something I've changed my mind on, when you think about balance, it's not about every single day being perfectly balanced. And that's what your tendency is. You want to think of balance. You're like, okay, well, I need to have a perfect balance every single day between my family, my work, my workouts, and my own solitude. I need to have a perfect balance. That is just never going to happen. It's very, very hard to find that perfect balance in the micro. What you can find is balance in the macro over the course of different seasons of your life. And what that means is that you have the freedom and the flexibility to have seasons that are unbalanced, that you can go all in on something and be deeply focused on one thing, but with the knowledge that a season of balance is to follow and that you need to embrace the season of balance that follows it. I am very much in a season of unbalance right now, going all in on one thing with a very laser narrow focus on achieving it and on building this movement. After that, I'm going to have a season of balance. And I don't need to stress about the fact that I'm in that season of unbalance right now because I know that the season of balance is to follow. Where if you think that every single day needs to be balanced, you're going to be really stressed during that period of unbalance because you're going to worry every day, oh no, I'm not spending enough time on this, and this. I'm not able to run a whole lot right now. I'm not able to spend as much time with my wife or son because I'm traveling so much right now. There are all these things that would stress me out if I viewed balance in the micro that don't stress me out because I'm viewing it in the macro. I know that after this launch and after I'm through it, we're going to reset and we're going to be together a whole lot more and we're going to be able to be in that season of balance that follows it.
I think that's a very wholesome perspective, the micro versus the macro, and it speaks to that reality of seasons. And to my point, balance is a lot. Value. You recently crafted an incredible thread. I checked again this morning, over 700,000 views on generating wealth and what it actually looks like. And I reposted it twice, actually, just because it spoke to me so deeply. One of the first things you talk about is like, no one's going to go out and just hand you money. And for whatever reason, I feel like people just expect that to some weird degree to the point that you have to write it out. What you also articulated in that particular thread was about scaling problems, scaling solutions to problems, and looking for problems all around you, whether it's employees, colleagues, on the street, wherever you see a problem, identify it, solve it, and then scale the solution. We talked about how you define wealth today. When it comes to financial wealth in particular, just because I feel like you're a very unique authority, having built wealth across these different dimensions of your life, what is it that people misunderstand about building financial wealth?
I think you hit the nail on the head with what you said, which is why that was the first one in that thread. The only way to build financial wealth is to create value. And when you create value, you receive value in return. The wealthiest people in the world financially have built extraordinary amounts, created extraordinary amounts of value for other people, immense value for other people. Because all it is they're creating immense value and then they're capturing a small percentage of that. That's how you make money. No one hands you money. And the second you stop creating value, you're not going to receive any in return. If Apple decides to stop making iPhones, in 2 years, they will no longer be a big company. Biggest company in the world, right? If they stop creating value for other people, they will stop making any money. The same applies to all of us. There's no such thing as making it. You don't just make it and then all of a sudden get to coast.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to deliver value every single day. And that principle gets lost. You think like, oh, if I just do my job description, I'll get promoted, I'll make tons of money, right? No, you have to create extraordinary amounts of value in order to get extraordinary outcomes. So if you want extraordinary outcomes, focus on how you can create extraordinary value. And I was having this conversation with a young guy on my team, 27-year-old who wants to make a lot of money. And I was explaining this to him and he said, well, how do I know what to create value? I said, look around you. Everyone around you has problems. You're on my team, right? We have 100 problems as an organization. Figure out a problem, identify a problem, figure out a solution, and then scale the solution. That is what creating value is. If you can do that, if you can identify problems, create a solution, and then scale the solution, that's how you make money. That's all it is. It's not easy, but it's simple. And the more scalable the solution is, the more money you'll make. I mean, I think about it in my own like media world, right? The content that I'm creating, the ideas that I'm sharing, all this stuff, it's a big business now, right? Like we can build a big business around the media. And that is a perfect example of that exact mental model that I just shared. Identify a problem. What's the problem? Well, there's a lot of people out there who are looking for certain answers in their life. They're on journeys, they're struggling with different things, and they're looking for better information about those journeys. Create a solution. I can write things about those. I can struggle with them. I can wrestle with those ideas, and I can share answers or help with the questions that will help those people. Scale the solution. Well, I can do it on social media, and I can do it through a newsletter that will scale as I continue to grow my audience and as people share it. So it'll go out to way more people a year from now than it will right now. Scaling the solution. Perfect example of that exact thing. It's creating value, and you're scaling the value you can create over time. So you get paid as a result. But that just gets lost in translation. Like at the end of the day, all you need to focus on is just creating value. And that comes down to output. It's not about your morning routine. It's not about your deep work ritual. It's about the value you can create for others. And that's your customers, it's your employees, it's your team, it's your colleagues, it's your family, whatever. It's the exact same thing. And that's like really a core golden rule for life is just create value, receive value over and over and over again.
I remember in your bio, I don't know if it's still there. I checked it recently. I don't think it is. Following my curiosity and sharing what I learned along the way. How have you cultivated your curiosity?
I think it's still there. If it's not, it's probably a mistake on my part. It's very core to how I think about the world. I mean, my newsletter is called The Curiosity Chronicle. In the book, I call curiosity the real fountain of youth. I just allow myself the space to pursue my curiosity. And I think that when you watch a little kid, I have a 2.5-year-old, everything they do is based on their curiosity. They have a curiosity for something and they just go down the rabbit hole on it, whatever it is. Right now, my son is obsessed with animals. He wants to learn about every animal. He wants to understand dinosaurs. Like that's what he's really excited about. So he has the space because he has no other responsibilities to go and pursue those. As your life becomes more chaotic, that space gets squeezed and you no longer have the space in your life to pursue your curiosity. But unfortunately, curiosity is really what keeps us young. Scientifically, people that are more curious live longer. They're healthier, they live better, happier, more meaningful lives. So creating the space in your life to pursue things that you are curious about is actually a really good way to live a healthier life and live a longer, more meaningful life. So I just make sure that I have the space to do that. And that can be as little as like 10 minutes a day when you just like give yourself the space to think about things or to read something that you're interested in. That's not necessarily productive or like utility bringing. It doesn't have to be making you money. It doesn't have to be monetizing something. It might just be interesting. Creating the space in your life to do that is a practice that I have done that has really enriched my life in a lot of ways.
In the couple minutes we have left, I know you're big on stories. I want to tell you a quick story. It's one of my favorite stories. There's a homeless man living on the street who dreams of winning the lottery one day. Finds a lottery ticket in the garbage, plays it, and before he finds out if he wins, he tells his friends, if I win the lottery, I'm going to throw a party every single week for a year. Lo and behold, man wins a lottery, and true to his word, he throws a party every single week for a year. And at every single party, he gives a speech, and at the end of the speech, he takes out a veil from his pocket, smells it, closes it up, puts it back in his pocket. And at the last party of the year, delivers his final speech. His friends come up to him, and they're like, what is that thing that you're smelling at the end of the speech that you give at the end of each party? He's like, you want to smell it? Here. Gives it to them. They smell it. They're like, oh my God, it's disgusting. It smells like garbage. He goes, it is. Why are you carrying garbage in your pocket? So I never forget where I came from. That is a lesson that story is from my father. And it's always stayed with me growing up because I never want to forget where I came from. I see a lot in your content, how you share stories and sentiments of lessons that you've learned, and it's clear that you have never forgotten where you came from. There's a question that I pose to all my guests that I now like to pose to you. If the future version of yourself, 10 years from now, were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think he would say to you?
Never lose sight of your true north. My parents a few years ago gave me this little silver compass as a birthday present. And inside it was inscribed with this message that says, it just said, Sahil, so you may always know where your true north lies. In that message, to focus on direction, not speed, focus on heading towards the things you truly care about, your true north, was so formative on this journey for my wife and I, for figuring out what our true north was, what the things were that we truly cared about, and then building our life around those. That message would lead me in the right direction. And I know there's going to be periods when we get way off course, when we need to readjust, but keeping that compass pointed towards true north, you know you'll be able to navigate through whatever storms come.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sahil Bloom, thank you so much for today. Where can people keep up with your journey?
I am at Sahil Bloom on every major platform, the benefits of having a weird name. And you can buy the book now anywhere books are sold, The 5 Types of Wealth, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's in Target stores around the country, and would absolutely love you to go pick up a copy. I really think it's going to deeply impact you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Pleasure to have you. Once again, my name is Jonathan Cohen, and this is Inside the Inspired.